Hello everyone and welcome back to my campaign diary for the Rime of the Frostmaiden campaign, Aracséa edition. In today's episode we're going to cover multiple sessions from session 28 to 24 to be exact, and cover the entirety of the next arc, the Cult of the Lost arc. And this will probably be how I'll be doing these videos moving forward, covering arcs in a span of videos. We might have more time between them. I know we've had a long time between the last one and this one, and there'll be slightly larger videos as we cover more ground, so we have less of these kind of like 10-minute videos going forward. So we will begin this on the 2nd of Inveroldin and will end up by the end of it on the 4th. So this will span 2 days of in-game time really, and we'll end about midday on the 4th of Inveroldin. So I think the best way to start this retelling would be to tell it from Freda's point of view. So if you remember from last session, they had just fought off Diaries at the attack on Bryn Shander, and most of them were laying unconscious. And if you remember, Freda was most definitely unconscious at the start of last session. So we begin with just me and Freda by herself, and she wakes to see as if she were at the bottom of a well. There is no light above her, and the walls are slick with ice. She cannot speak, but she can move. She begins to hear an echo from a nearby source, a faint noise that slowly grows around her, and until it kind of grows and is beset with cackling laughter from all various different voices that she realizes are people that she has met throughout her life. She can hear Mutiny, Stronus, she can hear her mother, Ilva, she can hear her grandmother, her supposed grandmother, Sather, Valea. She can hear many different voices from people she's met, all cackling and laughing at her, and they all kind of begin to say in unison that the idea of like, you thought one thing would be rid of us. They kind of taunt her with emotions like that. She's not entirely sure what she could be referenced, they could be talking about. I'll just let you guys know they're referencing her work at the Elven tomb that she did to plant that seed there and help cleanse that temple, because the whole idea of her kind of shadow is because of her failed pilgrimage. So this idea of maybe her thinking that she can do something here will help abate that, where clearly these shadow is telling her that is not the case. And these taunts continue, and they keep throwing insults and more taunts as the walls around her in this well begin to expand out and reveal a grey monochrome plane of nothingness around her. And there is a silhouette that walks towards her in this plane, with black flames licking out of its body and carrying a corrupted leopard over its shoulder that appears to be dead, and at one point begins to just kind of throw it on the ground and just drag it around. This is obviously a doppelganger here, this is a shadow version of Freda herself, a corrupted version, along with the corrupted Snows in Summer. Freda draws her axe and just charges, without even thinking, just charges straight towards the silhouette, which of course is the shadowy version of herself. And as she strikes, a distant light that was behind her originally gets further and further away, and after a time, sensing her attacks are all in vain, the victim of another cruel game of her affliction perhaps, she decides to drop her axe and just runs towards the light, reaching out for whatever spiritual connection was behind her. And then she wakes again, truly now, but this time she has an arrow in her leg, and Stronus lays beneath her unconscious. And so it appears, while Stronus attempted to heal her in the real world, she had had another one of her shadowy episodes, and it appears the shadow being she was attacking in her dream was in fact Stronus in reality. So me running this, there was a bit of back and forth between jumping between different players, and eventually I did bring her in because they all figured out what was going on. But it was still a cool little thing to do. Cool little. I've not taken a player aside to do a personal thing in a while, so it's good to do one, and because we're all getting a bit more acquainted with each other's story now, so you don't really have to spend so much time separating them. We might do a little bit more in the future as more things come apparent, especially with Stronus. We've not really touched on too much yet with his story, and certain aspects of mutiny as well. So, yes. And she notices as she stares down at Stronus that there are black sooty marks on his robes and on her arms. And after some kind of pondering about what perhaps damage she may have caused, if that was her or the remnants of a spell, she kind of pulls herself out of it for a second, and a healer from the village quickly comes over and starts curing Stronus' wounds, and Freda apologizes profusely over and over again. Not that it was received very well. Stronus, knowing that Freda is still hiding something despite their conversation the previous day, had nothing but disappointment on his face, had very little to say, but made it clear that he was not happy. Obviously, almost being driven to death by a supposed companion. Freda gives in, saying that she will talk about it later, but for now they have a village to tend to and people that need their help. Which is very much true. The village is kind of in burning. From the Dwagar attack, there's a lot of helpless people out there, many innocents slain. So each party member kind of goes off to help what they can, rebuild, tend to the wounded, or whatever else. Stronus casts a spell, a plea, I think it was like divination or something, to any god that would listen, to help, to ask if what they are doing is the right thing by continuing their journey despite the ultimatum that was given by Xerxes. He received a positive encouragement to his surprise from what seemed to be multiple entities vying to answer his spell, from Kithrea, one of the Dwarven Stone Lords, from Arkansas, and from another figure that appeared briefly as just a set of pale blue eyes. But in the end, after all that is said and done, Freda ends up at the Norfolk Tavern, drinking beside a red-skinned tiefling, namely Heresy, who we've not seen for a while, but he has been about. Freda confides in him, inquiring if he has any inner darkness that he struggles with, trying to find some recompense in him, I guess. And he begins to tell an elaborate story about an adventure he had on his ship, a battle that he and his crew ultimately lost, but before he could make his point, he passed out from the drink, and not long after, Mutiny joined her, having resummoned the passed away Azazel with her resummoning, and joining her in a drink, trying to drink away what has just transpired on that day. And meanwhile, with Stronus, after casting his spell, Raz approaches him. This is their official first meeting. That Stronus has not met Raz before. The rest of the party have, but this is the first time that Raz and Stronus have seen each other. And Stronus was intrigued by a fellow master wizard, and indeed just by the presence of a tabaxi this far up north. I don't think he would have seen one outside of Mount Minrock, and definitely not seen one for a very long time. And Raz offered some reassuring words about the nature of heroism, and I can't remember the words precisely, but it's along the lines of some people go out to be heroes, some people have herodom thrown upon them, and it's just how you deal with it, something like that. And together they helped repair some of the damage to the buildings before Raz set off to speak to Devessa, the idea being that he is there to offer his aid to the Owlsmooch should they need it, and need it they probably most likely will. After that, finally the group reconvene at the Speaker's Hall later that evening, with various members of the Higher Chamber, that being Garner Hammer to represent the Monument's Vigil, the Sheriff, Speaker Tula of Goodmead, and Captain Imdra of Easthaven, who have come with aid and supplies to aid in the reparations of Brynjander, arriving just some hours prior. Much politicking is kind of made, questions concerning what to do and what is to be done next. Stronus here shares his knowledge of the relics that Dunamis wielded and their possible connection to Minrock. He doesn't reveal everything, but he does, note that they are Dwagar relics that he recognises, and all that concerns that he must have plaguing his mind currently. And after that, a conversation between Stronus and Freda is had, where she ask him not to blame himself. Even if his team were to find these relics, he couldn't have known what would become of them, and things of that nature. She also here revealed more of her pilgrimage, of her backstory, and more about the nature of her darkness, for what little she actually knows of it. She kind of just explains her side of things, so at least it's sort of out there in the open and had that little chat. There's still much more for them to discover about that, but that will be something they have to tackle with later. Some suspicion is thrown at Hruna's absence given the Dwaga attack, mostly led by Freyda, as if they knew. It's almost as if they knew when to attack, when people would be there, and all those details. You know, it was a little bit suspicious, and the entire time the Dwaga have been one step ahead of the Runaways, and it is almost as if someone had been feeding the Dwaga information from the inside. And Freyda definitely spears with this suspicion. One that is, she's surprised to find that Speaker de Vessa also somewhat seems amiable to. It quite easily takes it on and seems to share a little bit of the suspicion herself. And perhaps it's the trauma of the situation, who can only know. And this only furthers the motion that they've come up with moments prior to investigate Caer Dineval, the location where Hruna was meant to have been to try and convince Speaker Kranich to join the Aalsmoot. So this mission would serve two purposes, both to check up on Hruna's progress, and since she's kind of gone missing or AWOL or whatever's happened, and to find out any involvement in the Dwaga plot from her side of things, or indeed from maybe the Speaker's side of things, who knows. So, and it was kind of the end of session 28. That was a little, a shorter one of sorts, and ended with the Runaways preparing to head to Caer Dineval. So moving on, session 29 begins with the party on the road to Caer Dineval. They travel for roughly 8 hours with no trouble or terse weather, much to the players' dismay, who are desperate for an easy victory after losing at the Battle of Bryn Shander. However, little did they know they were about to get far more than what they bargained for. Soon, maybe a couple minutes later, after the travellings for somewhat having a little bit of a chat, the weather takes a turn for ill as heavy snow and a thick wind begins to enrapture them. And soon enough, they hear a distant voice on the wind, a chant almost, the telltale sign of a spell being cast in their vicinity. The group is suddenly enveloped in a magical darkness, and something tackles Stronus to the ground and takes a swipe at him with a poisonous dagger. Initiative is rolled, and Stronus in his weakened state casts Dispel Magic, dissipating the darkness spell immediately. A fantastic move. It kind of eliminates one of the barriers to entry there for that fight. The group huddle together for protection as a whirlwind of snow and hail kind of blizzes around them and sort of blocks their vision from within like a 30-foot radius or so, and kind of back to back, ready to face their unseen assailant. They take turns attacking with range attacks somewhat aimlessly into the wind before they begin to break off and search for their actual attacker, who seems to be adept at eluding them within this weather phenomenon and within the snow that is around them. Soon enough, they are able to see a small, spry, stocky, dark-robed figure that lurks within the snowy dunes, haunched almost like if you're familiar with Warhammer, like a Skaven assassin, almost kind of hunched over and just very small, making themselves as little as possible within the snow. And they continue to fight as this entity seems to use almost shadow-like magic and bizarre tentacle-like appendages that emerge from its dark cloak to block attacks, and they even at one point catches Freyda's diaries and uses it against her. Eventually the creature gets to Stronus, who appears to be the target of this creature's ire, and stabs him with a dagger in the chest. As this dwarf-like stocky creature plunges this dagger into Stronus, Freyda is able to get up close and do the last final blow on it, completely decapitating the creature, and immediately pours a healing potion down his throat. I think was like like a few seconds away from death at that point. The group take a moment to examine the creature before it disappears entirely as it begins to kind of fizzle into the snow strangely. And it appeared indeed to be a dwarf, but its skin was grey and sullen, not like that of a dwargar, but almost ill or corrupted. And it seemed to have black veins that run taut over its skin. It was clad in all black leathers and bore a strange tattoo or something similar to that, some like markings on its arms that seems familiar to the group. And finally they noticed that it had a pair of walnut coloured braces which bore a similarly intricate kind of design. Soon enough the group realised the markings and braces match something that they've seen before and why it seems so familiar. These are similar to Hruna's braces and similar to Hruna's markings that she hides underneath her armwear. And you can imagine this only intensifies Freda's suspicion, and they do ponder for a moment, could this creature have possibly have been Hruna? And they try and quickly dismiss the idea, but a shade of doubt lingers in Freda's mind as to maybe what this could have been, if it's related to Hruna, or indeed was it Hruna herself, and what would she be doing in this moment. But lest we linger on that, in the aftermath of this whole thing, they're taking a short rest. Stronus realises he is missing something. He's missing his amulet that was given to him right at the very beginning of the campaign by Priestess Galarel. It appears the creature took it from him when he was first tackled, and perhaps that was the original intention for whoever ordered this hit. And between you and I, it was during the fight with Dunamis that the warlord saw this protective charm, realising why he hadn't been able to spy on Stronus. You and I know that Dunamis is indeed Vokun, and Vokun will obviously be trying to keep tabs on Stronus, and maybe wondering why it wasn't working. Well, now, once he got up close, you could see why, and why he would order this creature to perhaps try and remove that from him, and that seemed to be the sole goal of this attack. I'm not sure if they kind of caught on to that, but it definitely was something that plagued them for a bit. So let's also talk about this creature for a little bit. More of a person. This was a member of a very secretive order, renowned for assassinations and various other underhanded acts. A faction that indeed Hruna too is/was a member of, and we will talk about them once the party uncovers more of Hruna's story. So, yes, for everyone out there, it wasn't Hruna, but it is linked somehow, and the party will uncover that much later. So, short rest had, Freda has a little commune with herself, specifically to see if Snowden Summer walks towards her over the snow. However, there is a brief moment where she sees a faint black smoke rise from his footprints, which unsettles her and snaps her out of her commune. It's a little roleplay thing to let her know that the shadow has not gone from her yet. She still has much of her own stuff to overcome. So, the party make haste towards Caer Dineval and are met with suspicious eyes from the townsfolk. And above the crescent of the town, nestled in the bay on the hill, resides the intimidating fortress that is Caer Dineval itself, the Caer itself. Mutiny shares her apprehensions about being here, given that this is where all of her dreams have been pointing to. And while the party think about exploring the town, they resign to march straight towards the Caer and get this mission over and done with. They need a victory. That's kind of what's in their forefront now. They need to make a difference. So they ascend the crescent hill to the Caer, a large dwarven structure built long ago, and see a line of people eager to enter the keep, made up predominantly of tieflings. Stronus speaks with a couple at the back of the queue who speak of a new age of sorts, and when Freda asks for more specifics, they simply ask that they wait and see. The guards who come along take particular interest in Mutiny and Azazel, and when the people in the line see her with her bear, they also share the same sort of awe. The guards let her and the rest of the runaways straight through after this kind of moment of revelation or awe that they all seem to experience. Inside is the courtyard of the Care. They can see multiple robed members wearing the black sword amulets of Levistus that Mutiny has kept seeing, and that the rest of the party has seen briefly in Bremen. One of the guards comes straight up to Mutiny, exclaiming that "You have come!" And Mutiny has no idea what is going on, but everyone else seems to recognise her, and they find out that the speaker is in talks with someone called Majesty. And while Stronus and Freda stand somewhat confused and inquisitive, a little boy called Alan walks over to Mutiny and asks her if she is there to save them. And after reaffirming that she has no idea what everyone is talking about, the boy asks to tell her, asks if he can tell her a secret. He whispers in her ear that there are some people here who don't want them to be saved, or whatever that may mean. After a time, the gate to the Care proper opens and a tall tiefling emerges. One half of his body is black with a white eye and the other is white with a red eye, wielding a large buster-like berserk blade on his back. Very tall, very, very tall. Taller than Freda. And beside him is a very well-dressed, glitter-robed, blue-skinned tiefling. His features are very slender and handsome, almost as if elven in some respects, with horns that go back into his ponytail. He gives a sort of showman dramatic reading of the song that Mutiny heard in her dream a couple sessions back, and blatantly presenting Mutiny as the subject of the song. Stronus asks for his name, to which he replies, "I am Majesty." Now, the tall tiefling figure has gone from their point of view at this point. It just seems a straight leave. But do not forget about this figure, because he will be coming up at some point. He's there to remind... He's definitely there to footnote it and put it in your brain. So, with Majesty now out, he goes on to remark that they have expected Mutiny for a long time, a chosen one of Levistus, to lead the cult of the lost to their salvation. It's a very vague, all very vague cult kind of stuff, and Stronus remarks on the song as a prophecy. And finally, Majesty offers the group refuge inside the Care and invites them to feast in Mutiny's honour. That will be held at the day's eve. They, Majesty and a small contingent of guard, lead the group to a room on the second floor and suspiciously lock the door. If the group didn't think something was wrong before, they definitely should do now. They briefly talk about trying to bust out and go over other options, potentially just, and even including potentially just resting and seeing what happens in the night, fully expecting to be abducted or something. They give a small look around the room, and Mutiny finds and identifies a series of claw marks under the bed, marks left by an imp-like creature, a type of lesser devil that she's able to identify with her background within the Grey Priory, something that should send warning signals in their minds. And finally, they wait for the cover of nightfall, and we end that session there with Stronus casting Knock on the door, going invisible, and the party making a stealthy exit of the room. Now, obviously, there is something off about this cult, and it all gets revealed over the course of the next few sessions. And from a personal perspective, it gets interesting to see how Mutiny and her player, who is a bit shy on the RP side of things, as her character will have a huge amount of spotlight coming up within this following arc. So, Session 30 begins, and we engage in a cool little infiltration stealth mission, something I don't think happens a lot in D&D, and a section the group later remark on, and even to this day, like however many sessions I've done since this, as a super cool little section that they've done. So yeah, add stealth infiltration sections to your games, guys. It adds a little, Metal Gear Solid, Dishonored kind of style to your game. Just shake things up, have a little bit of a different pace of gameplay, and because it's cool and your players will love you for it, and it doesn't take much to prep it, honestly. So, Session 30. It begins with the party venturing out with insane stealth rolls, thanks again to the invisibility and Mutiny casting Pass Without a Trace. I think they all had like 30s or something. It was insane. They take to exploring the Care in order to find... well, they're not sure what to be honest, but what their obvious goal is to find Fruna and to see whatever else they can uncover here. And As they progress, I do the obvious, passing guard scenario where they have to hide up for a little section, they can watch them, and eventually I'm able to show them, various patrol routes while they observe them. I didn't have a player map out for this. I, of course, had one for me over Discord, but they didn't have one. So I think one of them, I think it might have been Carl Stronis' player, took it upon himself to kind of draw a map as they went, which again is something else I think you should encourage players to do when they're delving into a dungeon or whatever. You don't always have to give them the map, and just let them come up with it themselves. I think it's a lost part of this kind of game. Soon enough, they come across a few locked doors, but there is one which they are drawn to first, which has voices coming from beyond it. With a decent perception check, they hear Majesty speaking to Speaker Kranich beyond the door, with words in efforts in the sense of, in the vague kind of area that urge him to stay on track and that they have her, which they all assume is mutiny. Of course, why wouldn't you? They move on and find a large chapel hall of sorts where they find a tapestry depicting a figure that looks like mutiny somewhat, sitting on a throne alongside another tapestry that depicts creatures of ice and fire fighting against each other. A successful history check reveals that this is the famed rebellion of Levistus against Asmodeus, fought many years ago in the Hells, a crime for which Levistus is still paying for. They try some of the other locked doors, but indeed they're all locked, and without Forsburn there, they don't really have a means to open them besides the knock spell, and they don't really want to alert the guards to their presence too much. Behind one of the doors, however, in particular, Freda gets kind of like a feeling of warmth from her instincts, a sort of a good omen from her natural insight and her kind of spiritual connection. She gets like a good feeling behind one of the doors, something she footnotes and will return to later. Not sure where to turn at this point, they return to their own room that they were given and arrive just in time for the invisibility spell to drop. And so they're all kind of just in the room, and not soon after, a guard arrives to check on them, and they sort of bullshit their way out of that kind of situation very successfully, kind of giving the illusion that they've been here the whole time. The guard relocks the door and then leaves. From here, the group spend a bit of time discussing what they want to do. Mutiny expresses that she doesn't know if they should stay and see what happens, or just abandon the mission and try to escape. Freda asks, does Mutiny feel like she's in danger? Mutiny kind of just doesn't know, and at least that's what she says. She really has no idea what to expect. It was then Stronis begins to cast Augury to kind of get a feel for the place, ask a question, and Freda attempts to commune with Snows in Summer, her kind of spiritual animal, to also kind of get a read on their location. She rolls reasonably well on her insight check and begins to see through Snow in Summer's eyes. In brief, she sort of receives a warm feeling again through that locked door she felt before, a possible way to move forward, and a cold sense of evil from beneath the keep, and to the point where Snows in Summer refused to travel downstairs, and he wouldn't even travel to the right side of the third floor where Majesty was found previously, either, also receiving a similar kind of cold feeling from that room. Stronis comes to first from his vision, however, their respective trances, and reveals to the party, after casting his augury, that only ill will occur if they wait for morning. And Freda and the group kind of share all their information and decide that they are set to try to escape and explore further. Just as they make that decision, Majesty arrives at the door. He knocks, saying that their presence has alarmed forces that are moving against them being the cult, and he wants to move them to another room for their own safety. Stronis reads through Majesty's deception and makes it known to the others that he means them harm. Stronis makes mention of Asmodeus to Majesty, to which the group beyond the door respond to with disgust, whether feint or truth the runaways cannot tell. The group knowing that Asmodeus is in opposition to Levistus, they'd expect a disgust kind of response. But who knows at this point what these cults' true intention is, or at least Majesty's. At this point, the strain on Mutiny, the stress of the situation, begins to weaken her hold on herself. Something that hasn't happened in a long time, and something that I need to keep a note of to make happen more in the future, as this is a part of her backstory that hasn't really seen light. And she lets it known to the party that Crowley, her inner demon, is attempting to take control of her actions. A response that, from my point of view, is in responding to her not doing anything. You know, we want to urge her to do something. So Crowley attempts to take over. Nothing really happens beyond that point. That was kind of a failure on my part. But I will take a note of that to bring more of that sort of stuff in the future. And yeah, we'll go from there with that one. And I'm happy with the altercation so far. Majesty begins to unlock the door and a host of guards enter to search the room. They appear to look for Mutiny, but are unable to find her, as Stronus had cast invisibility on her before they entered. Believing that they had escaped, Majesty orders a full sweep of the building and locks Stronus in the room once more. Soon after, Mutiny is still invisible this for a time. They hear another lock on the door some minutes later after a brief discussion, as Alan, the little boy they had spoke to a few sessions before, knocks and is there to ask if they're okay, it seems. Stronus tells him that Mutiny has disappeared, but he knows where he might be able to find her if Alan could help him get out the room. The boy, fearing that it may be already too late for what, the group don't know, but Alan unlocks the door, remarking that people don't seem to notice the small ones that run around the keep, and urges Stronus to follow. Of course, it makes sense, you know, the small little stable hands will probably be unnoticed and probably get away with a lot of things. I always thought so anyway. If you play games like Oblivion or whatever, it always seems to be the beggars, you know, that are at the core of the Thieves Guild. They have all the information, that sort of thing. He leads them to the room where Freda had felt that warm feeling from before, from both of her sources, and unlocks the room and rushes them inside. In this room, there is a tiefling who appears to be in her early 50s perhaps, pale whitish skin and in a somewhat regal and fine robe, sitting in front of a fire. The room in general appears to be a study of sorts, with bookcases, a few tables, a writing desk, and many taxidermied animals mounted on the walls. Alan says, "Don't worry, Patience keeps quiet. She won't hurt you," referring to the tiefling woman who, upon closer inspection, seems to be humming to herself and is maybe blind or something, as she doesn't seem to react to anyone in the room with her. Alan tells of another servant called Meek, who knows of another way out of the keep and leaves to find him. He urges the group to remain here until he returns, and he leaves and locks the door, which finally it does spark a little bit of conversation about how this kid might just be sending them out to make some money or something. But Freda kind of reassures the group and tries to have faith in this kid. Of course, it would have been really funny if that was the truth, but it wasn't. So, they begin looking around the room a little bit and find a few things of note, actually. Noticeably Stronus, who finds a journal with a strange icon embossed onto the front, resting alongside a bizarre, sizable red jewel. We're talking about the size of someone's head, you know. It's quite a large jewel, and inside the book are a list of locations, dates, and notations, which I'll put up on screen and we'll talk about later. And in addition, inside were details on a bunch of spells that Stronus could later inscribe into his own spell book for a bit later. A little reward for the wizard there. And during this time, on the other side of the party, Mutiny feels a strange pull almost towards this patient character, individual who is sat by the fire and sits in a chair beside her. She feels as if she knows her almost, this sort of a bizarre familiarity that she feels towards this tiefling. And then, literally a few seconds, as if Patience sensed her sitting, she stops humming and begins rambling over and over, "Mutiny, far away she fled," and just keeps repeating that over and over and over. Mutiny tries to communicate, taken aback by this interaction, how she knows her name, and whatever else. And after some trial and repeated phrases from patients, gets a new line. Mutiny. Far away she fled. Protect her, I swore to you, Verity. She is safe. Verity, she is safe. And begins to ramble some more. And after more rambling, more trying to interaction, Patience seems to become a little bit more aware as Mutiny kind of touches her hand. She kind of looks at her through her kind of blind eyes and refers to Mutiny as her sweet sister's child. And putting two together, I don't think it's a massive leap for anyone at this point. It seems to be clear that Patience is Mutiny's aunt, and that this Verity is her birth mother. So, a big moment there for Mutiny, especially Mutiny's character, who has no knowledge of this at all. And we'll talk about it a little bit more in the future. Mutiny begins to get a little bit uncomfortable with this whole thing as more conversation occurs, trying to figure out what's happened. And it's obviously clear at this point that something has addled Patience's mind as well. But there are small glimpses of her family that ooze out, and after even more kind of coaxing and deciphering, confusedly mumbling through these phrases that she spits out, Mutiny is sort of led to believe that her own mother may have been the one to sell her soul to Crowley. However, Patience seems to suggest that she had no choice and it was done to protect Mutiny. Something that completely blows Mutiny's mind and brings up all sorts of feelings, especially in the character, especially in the player herself, and lets this flow through to Mutiny, who gets very uncomfortable and kind of just stands up and says, I can't deal with this conversation anymore, and just simply says, look, I'll get you out of the keep and to safety, and we'll need to talk about this later. Not that Patience understood that, but Patience sort of nods, and yeah, they are preparing to just bust her aunt out of the keep. After that, Stronus shows the group his findings, and as each of them kind of examine this large red jewel as well, a few arcana checks are made, and between them learn this item to be known as something called an Anchor of the Nine. And all they know of it is it has something to do with planar anchoring and moving things between planes. Some sort of energy source or something like that. And ultimately they will decide, Majesty probably shouldn't have this, and so they decide to take it and have to carry it because it's quite a sizable piece. They could probably put it in a bag, but I imagine they carried it under arm or something. So, soon after that, Meek appears behind the door and leads the group to the secret exit beneath one of the interiors of the lookout towers within the keep. And guards are hot on their trail at this point. The group barely escape and leave Meek to kind of lock the secret hidden doorway behind them, who he assures that the guards have no idea about. They are kind of left after this kind of getaway, standing in a dark cavern that goes downwards, and they can hear beyond the stone wall behind them that has been locked, Meek being beaten for his transgressions, I guess. It's kind of a weight they carry on their shoulders from now. They are able to swiftly bypass it, noting that one day they will return to liberate this keep from under this cult's control. Put some peace of mind in their tracks, I suppose. They travel down this passage to another kind of watery area at the rear end of the keep, it seems, and something that was perhaps once used to accept goods into the keep from the lake, or smuggle, who knows. They note the plummeting temperature and how their breath almost freezes in this new space, and move on to explore even further. In the side room, near where they arrived, they find several dead cultists, all with bizarre char-like lashes on their skin. Curious, why would a cult kill their own? And what caused those wounds, they ask themselves. They continue on to find a grate behind a magically sealed chain, where they see Hruna, bound, bruised, and wounded with similar black markings, but nonetheless alive, all but barely. Freda briefly mentions that she is glad it wasn't her that she cut the head off on the ambush on that road. A statement which utterly confuses Frona, as it doesn't seem to be the right place to talk about something like that. Instead, she insists that they just get her out and that her captors went further down the passage and that they should have the key. Following her direction, the group move further in, and soon they find a room bathed in blue light, and inside a group of cultists in black robes chanting around an altar to Levistus. They immediately sense that these are no Levistus worshippers and prepare for another battle. And now, before we move on to the next session, because that was where that one ended, I just want to talk about the book they found for a second and go over what each thing is, and in particular something of relevance in regard to mutiny that she later picks up on a few sessions down the line. So, Bremen is a place they know of. 1267 is the current year, so just bear that in mind when looking at the other bits. And mentions of a coin. They will have a discussion in sessions to come that brings to light that these coins may be soul coins, a sort of currency used within the Nine Hells. As to the nature of the intact or extracted, they cannot say, but they speculate it's some sort of investment made in mortals from certain devils that can later be reaped, which isn't entirely wrong. That's in fact quite accurate as what they do. Turel Heights is another location to the east within the Judecan Kingdom. The Hillian Valley, now this is the important one, dated 25 years ago. The events described here is a direct reference to Mutiny's upbringing. If you remember, she never knew her real parents, but knows she was brought up by humans in the Hillian Valley, and when she realizes this, she remembers the same symbol on the book was worn on the capes of the tiefling attackers that burnt her village to the ground and killed her parents. The source for her hatred towards devils and the Devilkin is right here in this book. It all seems to be linked. What does it mean? She doesn't know, but it's one step forward in her story that she hasn't had before. And the relation is clearly mentioned is obviously patience, that they have her, so taking that off of them is another drag back for whatever they seem to be doing. Suddenly some of Mutiny's unknowns seem to be coming to light, and this is a big mutiny section that we had here. A lot of revelations, a lot of trying to force the player to do a little bit of RP, not so much force, but encourage, I guess, and to get a little bit more information. And there will be a little bit more mutiny stuff going forward as her story kind of runs parallel to the rest of it now. So, the other places on the book aren't relevant right now. They do have some significance, but nothing that matters to the party for right now. They might look back on it and go, oh, this is this, but it doesn't matter. So, moving on. Lastly, session 31. The fight against the cultists begins, and the cultists go down relatively easy, and not only easily, with each death they seem to go gladly. Freda notices that their blood kind of begins to pool and ooze into the altar, and with seeing this immediately attacks the altar to try and prevent whatever ritual was being done. She slices at the ice that kind of encapsulates the table and relinquishes the idol of Levistus, which kind of rolls past the party and into the water behind them. And as the fight continues, the air begins. They all notice that the air gets warmer and warmer, and there's like a rumble, a distant rumble. The ground begins to shake, and as more cultists fall, it kind of gets to the last few, and they all split their own wrists. They all kill themselves. They give their blood freely, saying that the group cannot escape now, which completes the ritual, whatever they were doing, and summons behind them a horned devil that rises from a molten crack that appears beneath the water. It turns the water boiling. The ice immediately rapidly melts. The boiling water is kind of spiring out, and this horned devil emerges from the crack, much like the chain devil emerged from that crack all those sessions ago. Patience, seeing the devil rise and perhaps sensing her niece in danger, appears to change in demeanour. Her eyes begin to glow, and ice-like armour emerges from her and begins slinging ice-based spells at the attacker, joining the fray as another kind of aid in there. Also gave me a little bit of opportunity to try out my ice sorcerer that I've been tinkering with for a bit. So, the fight against the devil continues on, and a lot of damage is taken, mostly by Freda, who notices that she receives the wounds she receives from these attacks are the similar char-like wounds that Taruna had. Perhaps this was the source of the attack. They don't know. Mutiny, meanwhile, feels a cold pull towards the idol that's kind of beneath the boiling water. She almost hears it almost appears to call to her, and she hears the word emissary kind of float into her ears, and she scrambles through the boiling water. Just kind of, I don't think, it might be out of morbid curiosity, and she grabs the totem piece, and upon touching it, experiences some sort of vision or temporal translocation or something. But she finds herself in a tall crystalline room or structure, or perhaps inside a shard of ice or crystal itself, and before her is a large throne entirely encased within ice, and within it a handsome tiefling-like creature, giant and unmoving, the very visage of Levistus, fabled visage himself. And in her mind an exchange is made. Words. He kind of laments, "Thou art my chosen emissary. Listen not to the whims of the arch-fiend. My servants are misled. Do you wish to be freed?" Mutiny. And she has some reluctance, but she eventually agrees that she wishes to be freed. From what she's agreeing to, she doesn't know. Is she being freed from her shackles from Crowley, or what? It's to be known. He replies, "Release me, emissary. I can show you the way, if you let me. Seek my crown, a gift bestowed upon me by the once proud and tall of this frozen land. It resides where all crowns should, upon a throne fit for a king of giants." And those two last lines are the clue to where she must next travel to continue this journey. She awakens from her trance, from whatever it is, and feels empowered, almost like a gift has been bestowed upon her, an icy gift from Levistus himself, and is able to make the killing blow to the devil, to the horned devil. Patience, once the devil is slain, immediately collapses, seeming having used all of her energy reserves, and returns to her previously kind of addled self. Freda searches for a key on one of the cultists that was slain, still aware that the search party going on above them is continuing, and that it should only be a matter of time before they breach this part of the keep, and uses the key to release Hruna from her magical seal. And they quickly find her belongings and make way for the water exit at the end of the passage. They set up a small camp some ways away from the town, and I note that they can see in the distance that the flickering torchlights kind of go up and down the crescent, where the whole town seems to be an active hunt for them. And not a pleasant sight by any means, but one they are safely out of the way for right now. This also gives them a little bit of time to recoup. They heal Hruna up. Patience has a bit of time to recover with her niece, and Freda also submits Hruna to a small interrogation of sorts. And like I said before, Freda takes the helm on this immense suspicion that she has. And for the many factors that we talked about before, could Hruna be the mole? Why was she not at the Brinchander when the attack happened? Did she know about it? Why is she similar to the assassin that tried to get Stronus on the way here? And question Freda does. Hruna claims to know nothing and rolls really, really well on her deception, but Freda rolls better. So now Freda knows there is something she is not telling them, which sows deeper ties of mistrust. The fact that Hruna was such a good liar, and Dan knows what Freda rolled. He rolled that well. There's something going on, and Freda knows it. Hruna, however, did reveal to them about what happened to her. Namely, she infiltrated Caer Dineval, as was her mission, but was caught and attacked by a large tiefling. She didn't get a great glimpse of the attacker, but she did remark that they used unnatural attacks, which left her markings on her. This tiefling, if you haven't figured it out already, is the half-black, half-white tiefling they witnessed leave the Caer before they entered. I'm not entirely sure that the group realised this. He is a sort of a Hell's Bounty hunter, if you like, and he will be making a return. And at some point, I've got it in the back of my head where and what he will be doing. So just keep that in mind. Yeah, so after the rest is had, they make their way back to Bryn Shander, having succeeded in rescuing Karuna and with Patience in tow, who is taken upon arrival by the priest to the temple to aid in her recovery. They also decide to leave the Anchor of the Nine under the Speaker's protection in her hall, as it is a sizable artifact that is somewhat cumbersome to carry. But hopefully nothing bad will happen with that decision, but we shall see. You know, a powerful artifact left in the middle of a village that's been attacked, but who knows, it might be fine. And finally, lastly, given the news of Caer Dineval's usurpers, Devesa notes that their hostilities make them void in terms of the Yarlsmoot tradition, and that the next phase of the kind of beginning of this new faction can begin. And thus, I'm paraphrasing all of this, obviously, and there's more to it than that, but that's the brief of it. Thus begins the Runaways' journey southward on this next arc to the location of the Yarlsmoot Keep, at the base of Wyvern's Ire Peak, and the next section of our journey in the Frostgales. And that is all for this little arc, the Cult of the Lost. And I have a lot more to catch up on. I have done many more sessions, and I have a lot. I've been really slacking with these, and I'm trying to get back onto them. But it will all be coming soon. So as always, thank you guys for listening, and we will see you next time.